Story 1. I gotta tell you this story, okay? So, my cousin B, he works as a nurse. You know how it is. Long hours, barely any sleep, always on his feet. I don't know how he does it, man. Anyway, this one time, B was working the night shift at this hospital in St. Paul. The hospital's kinda old, and B said parts of it feel like they're straight out of a horror movie. Dim lights, that weird smell of sanitizer, and something else. You know, hospital smell. B's shift was pretty normal at first. He was taking care of patients, doing the rounds, all that nurse stuff. Around 2 a.m., things got quiet, like eerily quiet. If you've ever been in a hospital late at night, you know what I'm talking about. The whole place just feels dead. B was walking down this hallway on the 4th floor. That floor didn't have many patients, just a few older folks. He was checking charts when he heard it, the sound of someone humming. But it wasn't like a happy hum. It was low, kinda sad, like one of those old Hmong funeral songs the elders sing. He looked around, but no one was there. The hallway was empty, and all the patient rooms had their doors shut. B's first thought was that it was probably coming from one of the rooms, so he kept walking, but the humming followed him. No, I'm serious. It followed him. He got to the nurses' station and asked one of the other nurses if they heard it, but they just looked at him like he was crazy. He brushed it off, thinking maybe he was just tired. You know, working nights can mess with your head. But then it got worse. Around 3 a.m., B was in one of the patient rooms, checking vitals. The patient was this older Hmong lady, real frail, hardly spoke any English. As he was adjusting her IV, she suddenly grabbed his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone so weak. She looked him dead in the eyes and said in Hmong, "She's here." B was like, "What? Who's here?" The lady didn't answer. She just stared past him like she was looking at someone or something standing right behind him. B said the hair on the back of his neck stood up. He didn't even want to turn around, but he forced himself to look. There was nothing there. He tried to shake it off, but as he was leaving the room, the old lady started humming, and it was the same exact melody he'd heard earlier in the hallway. B said he practically ran out of the room. Later, he was in the break room, trying to calm down. He told one of the other Hmong nurses what happened, and she just nodded, like she wasn't even surprised. That's when she told him about the night nurse. Apparently, there's this ghost that shows up on the 4th floor. People say she was a nurse back in the days or something, before the hospital was remodeled. She died in some kind of accident. No one really knows the full story, but ever since then, people have seen her wandering around at night. The thing is, she doesn't just show up randomly. She only appears when someone's about to die. B laughed it off at first. He was like, "Okay, sure, a ghost nurse. That's real original." But deep down, he was scared out of his wits. The rest of the night went by without anything weird happening. B thought maybe he was just spooking himself, you know? He finished his shift and went home, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. The next night, he was back at work. Around the same time, 2 or 3 a.m., he was doing his rounds again. He said he was trying really hard not to think about the humming or the old lady or the ghost nurse. But then he saw her. She was standing at the end of the hallway. B said she looked like a regular nurse at first. She was wearing one of those old white uniforms, the kind they don't wear anymore. But there was something wrong about her. He couldn't quite put his finger on it. B froze. He wanted to move, but his legs wouldn't listen. She started walking toward him, real slow, like she had all the time in the world. And then she started humming. It was the same melody. B said he felt like he couldn't breathe. He thought he was going to pass out, but just as she got closer, one of the other nurses came around the corner, and the ghost vanished. B didn't say anything. He just finished his shift and went home. The next night, he called in sick. He couldn't go back to work. Not after that. He stayed home for a couple of days, but when he finally went back, he found out that The old Hmong lady had died the same night he saw the ghost. The weirdest part? When they found her, she was humming. I don't know, man. Maybe it's just a story, but it makes you think, doesn't it? What if there really is something out there watching us, waiting for the right moment to show itself? Story 2. This was years ago when I was working the night shift at a hospital. You know how people say hospitals are creepy? Yeah, well, they don't know the half of it. So, it was just another long night. I worked as a nurse in this small town hospital. Nights were usually quiet. Most patients were asleep, and we just did our rounds, checked charts, and waited for the morning shift to take over. I was working with this other nurse, Kathy. She was older and had been there forever. It started around 2 a.m. You know how they say the veil between the living and the dead is thinnest around then? Well, I never really believed that stuff, but maybe there's something to it. I was sitting at the nurse's station, sipping my cold coffee and trying to stay awake. Kathy was in one of the rooms with a patient. The hospital was quiet, almost too quiet. Then I heard it, a soft shuffling sound, like someone dragging their feet down the hall. I looked up expecting to see Kathy, but the hall was empty. The sound kept coming, slow and loud, like whoever was walking didn't care if they made noise. I got up, thinking maybe it was one of the patients wandering around. That happened sometimes, so I wasn't too concerned. I walked toward the sound, but as soon as I turned the corner, it stopped. Dead silence. I called out, "Hello? Do you need help?" No answer, just the buzz of the fluorescent lights. I checked the patient rooms, but everyone was either asleep or accounted for. Weird, right? But I didn't think too much of it. I figured I must have imagined it or something. So I went back to the nurse's station. Kathy was back by then, flipping through charts like nothing was wrong. I didn't even tell her about it. No point, you know? She'd just think I was being jumpy. But then, not 10 minutes later, it happened again. The shuffling sound. This time, Kathy heard it too. She looked up at me, her eyes narrowing. "Did you hear that?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I thought it was a patient, but I couldn't find anyone." She frowned and got up. "Let's check it out." We walked together, following the sound. It was coming from the end of the hall, where the last patient room was. That room was empty. Nobody had been assigned to it for weeks. As we got closer, the shuffling stopped again. Kathy opened the door and flipped on the light. The room was empty, just like I knew it would be. But something felt off. The air was cold, colder than the rest of the hospital. Kathy stood there for a moment, just staring into the room. Then she muttered something under her breath in Hmong. I didn't catch all of it, but I recognized the word for spirit. "What's wrong?" I asked. She shook her head and turned off the light. "Nothing." "Let's go." But it wasn't nothing. I could tell by the look on her face. She looked spooked. We went back to the nurse's station, but the night didn't get any better. Around 3 a.m., one of the call lights went off in room 12. That was weird, because room 12 was the empty one. Kathy and I just stared at each other. I could see the unease in her eyes, even though she tried to hide it. "I'll go," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. She didn't argue. I walked down the hall, and every step felt heavier than the last. When I got to room 12, the door was already open. The light was off, but the call button was still glowing red. My hand was shaking as I reached for the switch and turned on the light. The room was still empty. The bed was made, and everything was exactly how we left it. But there was this smell, faint but distinct. It was the smell of burning incense. That's when I noticed the bed. The blanket had an indentation, like someone had been sitting there. But there was no one there. I backed out of the room so fast, I nearly tripped over my own feet. When I got back to the nurse's station, Kathy didn't even ask what happened. She just said, "I've heard stories about this hospital. There are spirits here, lost ones. Some of them, they don't want to leave." I didn't know what to say to that. I mean, I'd heard ghost stories before, but this felt different. This felt real. We got through the rest of the shift somehow. The shuffling sounds didn't come back, and the call light didn't go off again, but I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something was watching us. Kathy must have felt it too, because she stayed close to me the rest of the night. The next morning, after our shift ended, Kathy told me a story. She said that years ago, when the hospital was first built, there was a Hmong patient in room 12, an old woman. She didn't speak much English, and her family couldn't visit often. She passed away alone in that room, and Kathy said her spirit never left. She's looking for her family, Kathy said. She's waiting for them to come for her. I don't know if that's true, but I'll tell you this. Every time I passed room 12, I felt that cold air and smelled that faint hint of incense. It's been years, but sometimes, late at night, I'll wake up and hear that shuffling sound in my dreams. Or maybe it's not a dream. Who knows? Thank you for listening to this video. I'll see you in the next one.